Alrighty, welcome everyone to this webinar on Figured and benchmarking within Figured. Thank you very much for taking the time to come attend. Just to introduce myself, my name is Nick. I'm a part of the customer success team here at Figured. If you guys are using the product and you have any questions or you'd like a bit of advice in terms of building out your benchmarking pools, please feel free to get in touch with us. We're available on every page in Figured on the bottom right hand corner using that little green chat bubble. Our team is available during business hours, and you can also reach us at support@figured.com. So let's dive straight into it. Today we're going to be going through a few different parts of how benchmarking works. We're going to talk a little bit high level about it, and then we're going to dive straight into creating some benchmark pools and running one of the reports on one of our farms. We're going to do that introduction, then we're going to dive into how it will work for your clients and the kind of farms that we're expecting you guys to be adding to your benchmark pools. There will be a little bit on building out those pools, how to identify good farms to add, how to do exactly that. Then generating the report, and we'll dive into Figured as well to take a look at that. We'll go through and we'll actually be creating a pool using one of our groups of farms that have been provided by one of our training partners. And then I have some advice in terms of maintaining good data on your Figured and your Xero files in order to make sure that you get the most out of your benchmarks. Right at the end, we're going to run a Q&A. However, if you come up with a question in the middle of this webinar, please feel free to fire it on through. We might be able to address it at the same time, or we can get to it at the end of the webinar. So what is benchmarking? Within Figured, benchmarking is your report with your clients. Each of your benchmark pools are made out of your own firm's clients. So you're only comparing it to the people that you have as Figured customers. No two pools are the same between different clients though, because it's using a statistical interpretation of the data that's on your different Figured files. That means that when you are generating a report, it's going to be totally unique. So if you have your firm's report, that's a really unique value add that you can offer to your clients as a part of this advisory piece. And what we want to offer to you as well is a free use of benchmarking right up until the beginning of February. So what you can do is build out a couple of benchmarking pools, and you'll be able to jump in and do that exactly just after this webinar. And then maybe start running some reports and send them to some of your clients and see what kind of conversations you can get going from there. In terms of choosing the farms that will fit best within your benchmarking pools, we have a couple of different suggestions, and this is all based on the kind of data that we've been collecting from Figured users over the last year or so. So one of the things I want you to think about are the common characteristics across the types of farms. So I'm talking farm size, whether they're between, say, 100 to 200 hectares or 300 plus, or whatever's most common across your client base. I want you to be thinking about the kind of location they're in, because, of course, a Northland dairy farmer will be different to a Waikato one. And then, again, going further into that, thinking about the type of operation that they're running. Figured benchmarking is available for two main types of farming at the moment. We've opened it up for dairy as well as sheep and beef farms. So we can dive really deep into that, and we can look at, say, owner-operated dairy versus a share milker. You can go that level of detail into identifying the different types of operations. When you go ahead and you create a new file in Figured, you may have already noticed that we ask for a few identifying things like the region, like the operation type, and that's going into helping you generate these benchmark pools. Like we mentioned, you can have multiple pools. So you may have a few for dairy, maybe based on the different regions, or you may have a couple of share milker and then owner-operator pools, and then you can have them for sheep and beef. Now, the main reason we've chosen these is because these are really common across New Zealand. This is only available within New Zealand for the moment as well. And with these different benchmark pools, you can choose different KPIs and different metrics to compare. You can create your benchmarks with a single click, and this is something that's really exciting to us, because once you've built out this pool, so long as you've kept your Xero and you've kept your Figured up to date, all you need to do is click this little rerun button, and then that'll take a new snapshot of all of the data across your entire pool. So whether you have 20 farms or whether you have 200 farms in that pool, you click a single button, that'll rerun that benchmark data set for you, and then the next time you go to run that report on one of your clients' farms, you know that you'll be running with the latest set of data. You'll also see here that we show a comparison of the different KPIs. So you can see we've got, on this one, we've got farm A, B, C, D, and onwards. So you get a quick glimpse into making sure that the data is up to date before you go ahead and publish that pool for creating your different benchmarks. There can be different benchmarks for different farms. I've got a couple that I've created here as an example. One for sheep and beef in the North Island doing breeding and finishing. Another one maybe for a dairy benchmark specifically for Waikato. And then another demo one. So we can go to any level of detail that you want. However, when it comes to creating these benchmarks and creating these benchmark pools, we recommend having at least 20 farms of a similar type in that benchmark pool. You can do it with fewer farms. However, we've found that 20 or more is really that sweet spot to get statistically important data out of there. So a minimum of 20, it's just within your own firm's farms at the moment as well. At the end of this, you'll then be able to run a little report, which is going to be really easy to do, and it can be run on each of your different client farms, and you can run it as many times as you want. Now, I think this is a really good point for us to then start and dive directly into Figured and start looking at what that's like to actually build out one of these benchmarking pools, because at the end of this webinar, I want to equip you with the information to then go out and then straight away start working on a benchmark pool. So let's go ahead and dive into the product. Oh, I'll duck that away. So this is just your regular my.figured.com when you first log in. And we can see up at the top here, if you've been invited to your organization and you have admin level access for your organization in Figured, you'll see benchmarking up at the top here. And this is where you're going to be able to dive into things. Now, for benchmarking, for this particular demo, we're going to be using farms from our training partner, Accounting Pod. Now, Accounting Pod is a cloud education platform for accounting students and teachers. And at the end of the course, the students understand core agri-accounting concepts and they know how to use Figured and Xero. You can learn more at accountingpod.com. But let's go ahead and dive into this organization that we've already set up. And you can see that I have a few benchmarks that have already been created. Let's go ahead and create a new pool. So then we've got our name here that we can have. So maybe let's pop in Southland Dairy Farms. And you've then got an option here to enter in a description. I really recommend being as detailed as possible with these descriptions, because if we take a look at that previous page, you'll see that that description is going to be coming up here for you to select the different pools. So let's be really specific. Let's say that we're going to be looking for Southland Dairy Farmers. We want them to be owner, operator, and we can even go into the type of feed that they're using. So let's say they're Dairy NZ Type 4. Then we have an option to choose the year for this benchmark, because you may want to be changing out your different pools as the years go on. So let's choose a particular year. I'm going to do 2018 there, and that's just the financial year. Then you get to choose the period, whether it's yearly or quarterly, and this is a really cool opportunity for you to be able to go out, create these quarterly benchmark pools for really high-performing clients, and then they can compare that more regularly and have more regular conversations about how they're doing against that standard. Then we have our year-end month. So you have to set a common year-end month across all of your clients. Of course, it's quite easy when you've got something like dairy, because everyone tends to end their financial year at a similar time. But you then nominate that here. The next thing we get to take a look at is the type of data. And when I look at the type of data, we're saying either actuals, which is the data that's sitting within Xero and gets synced to Figured, actuals plus forecast. And if you guys aren't familiar with this, we do have a Figured 101 webinar that talks about the different sets of data. But if we're looking at actuals plus forecast, that's your editable prediction for the rest of the year. And then you've got your budget in there, which is that set of data that you would have created and Figured once, locked down, and then copied across to your forecast. A neat opportunity would be to say, create a budget and then compare your different clients' benchmarks against that, your different clients' budget against that benchmark. If we choose actuals and forecast as well, you then choose when those actuals are to. Now, in terms of the farms and the type of Figured licenses that you can add to a pool, you can add either Figured Lite or Financial Farmer subscription. So that means that you may have some farms that don't actually have a forecast or a budget. So it's really important to bear in mind what type of clients you have set up within Figured. It may make sense instead just use actuals, or to use actuals plus forecast if you have a few who are using Financial Farmer. Remember that Figured Lite only operates on actuals, and it only gives you that production data, so you wouldn't be comparing, say, how their budget's performing. Then we get to choose our basis, whether we want this to be on a cash or on an accrual basis. The data that we're using here will be using the cash and accrual dates from Xero as well, so it's important to bear in mind which one makes the most sense. I'm going to use cash for our example. And then our country, we're going to pop this as New Zealand, because benchmarking is only available to New Zealand at this moment in time. So let's go ahead and click save. And now we've just made our benchmark pool. It gets saved as a draft, and we can see that we haven't added any farms to it just yet. So let's go ahead and do that and click into that pool and then go add some farms. When we go to click add farm, we'll be given a page here to search through our locations and our types and the farm names. So earlier when I was talking about how that can be one of the things to filter through to choose the farms that go into a pool, this is where that comes through. So I can change my location to Northland. And maybe I want my dairy owner operators. And then I want my specific type of feed mix that we're using. So I'm going to use system 4. And then I can search for that. And then that'll return to you all of your clients that use that set of data. So I'm going to go and select a couple of them. So chuck these guys in here for now. Then I can save that, and we can do another search and then add a few more in. So let's do Southland again. Owner operator, type 4. And if I've got a particular farm that I really want to search for, I can type that in here now. Then when I enter that in, we can then add that, and we can do that multiple times to build out that pool. Straight away, you can see I've got some pretty good benchmark scores. That's saying that I've got a region set and I've got an area set, because one of the KPIs we're going to look at is the performance and your dollar amount per hectare. If you're missing data and this benchmark score isn't ready yet, you can always click on this little icon under Actions, the one with the piece of paper and the pen. And if you click on that, that'll then take you through to that farm for you to then go through and edit the details about it. So you can go through, edit the region, edit the name, and then go under farm area. You can then change the size of the farm. But let's go back. Next, we get to go to our metrics tab here, and this is going to allow us to choose the metrics that we want our benchmarking pool to run against. So being a dairy farm, I'm going to use the kg of milk solids, and I'll probably chuck up the peak cows milked and the milking platform area. And let's put in a hectare one as well. And we can pop in stock units if you want to too. So let's hit save there, and then take a look at how that's changed some of our farms. Across each of these farms, you'll see they've got a benchmark score, and that score is determined by the KPIs that you've chosen to nominate to look at, as well as some really basic things like whether it has a region or whether it has an area yet. So for this particular one, I'm taking a look here. I've got a 77% score. I have my region and my area and the peak cows all set. However, my milk production doesn't seem quite right. So that could just be that I've got a bit of a smaller farm, or it could be that I haven't filled out all of my data. And then when I look at the next one, which says that this farm has milk production for all the relevant months, I've only got it for about half of the months. So then what you might want to do is then jump into that figured file, fill out the data that it's missing. On the note of dairy farms, of course, remember that we do have a farm source integration. So if you're looking at this kind of production data and you have Fonterra farmers, remember to get them set up with Figured and farm source so that we can pull through the production data automatically for them. So moving forward, let's take a look at our data here. And if we take a look at the data here, this is where we start our benchmark run. Taking that snapshot of all of the data that's across our Figured farms, and then we're going to run our benchmark against that. So we'll start that run. It could take a couple of minutes to do. It depends on how large your files are. But here we can go. We can see that it ran really quickly. And now let's compare how our data compares to our metric. So I'll click Update here. And that shows me that I've got this one here, which somehow has $2 million of milk solids. So 2 million kilos of milk solids produced, which seems a little high. So this is also an opportunity for you to take a look and remove outliers from your farms. You can compare each of these different metrics, see which one looks right, which one doesn't, and then either go and make the changes you need to make in order to get useful data out of this, or maybe eliminate them from the pool and then find someone who's a little bit more suitable. But we can see here, across some of my KPIs, I may not have the best set of data, but that's okay. We'll look to this in the future anyway. So we've done and we've looked through our data there. If we're happy about this, we can then publish it, or we can go back to our farms, do the same thing again, go add a couple more. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's just search through all of our farms that we have. So I'll put some of these in here. And remember, our goal is to kind of add up to that minimum 20 mark there. You can do it for fewer, but again, we recommend having at least 20 in there in order to get the most out of your pools. And then once we add in more farms in there, we can then do the same thing again. Go to your data, rerun that benchmark and start that run again, and then take a look at the data that we've generated, and we can update and see how it performs against that metric. So generally, we're anticipating people will be going through and actually running and rerunning these benchmarks maybe every month or 2 months, depending on how frequently you keep your Xero up to date. Once we take a look at that, we'll look at our metric again. We can see that we've got a few here, some which don't have data. In the ideal world, we'll then go back and we'll make sure that these farms are suitable and that they are correct for this pool. But let's just go ahead and publish this for now. Once you've published it, everyone that's inside of your organization, so all of your staff members, will be able to go in and run their benchmark against that. So I've got one of my farms here. I can now go to my reports, and then I'll have benchmarking under here. Now, if you don't have benchmarking available down there, that's okay. It just means you need to go to your organization, go through to your organization name here. So I'm going to use Accounting Pod again. Look at the farms, and then make sure that you have enabled benchmarking. By default, all of your clients will have it disabled. So you'll need to go through and re-enable it there. So we can go ahead and do that, and then they'll have access to benchmarking, and then they'll be able to see those reports. So let's go back here. We're looking at our benchmarking here, and then this will show you all of the pools that you have available as a team member. Now, that one that I just created a little bit earlier, that was this one here, Southland Dairy Farms. I'll then click Run Report, and Figure is going to take a snapshot of all of the data that's within that farm, compare it to the benchmark pool, and generate it into a really nice and clean report for you. Now, this can take a couple of minutes to run. Remember, we are doing a lot of checking against a lot of different types of data. So in the meantime, I'm going to duck in and use this report here that I've already generated. And at the end of the day, this is what you get to generate. This benchmark comparison tool, this report that's unique to your firm, that's unique to your firm's clients, showing you a summary of the farm that they have, KPIs comparing your farm against that benchmark. If you're doing better, it's in green. If you're not doing so well, it's in red. Scrolling down, and forgive the fact that we don't have the best data in this particular pool, you then get a production graph if it's dairy farms. You'll be able to go through, see either the kg of milk solid per cow, or over the milk platform, or production by hectare. Then we can go down and take a look at your farm income and your financial performance against the benchmark. So we see here your farm income per kilo of milk solid versus your dollar per hectare. And then we have all of your farm working expenses. Now, these expenses, they might look already familiar to you, and they should do, because these are the categories that exist within Figure's reporting already. So we're pulling from the categories that you've already categorized your chart of accounts to. Now, if you're looking at this and you're thinking, oh, I haven't gotten around to doing that just yet, don't worry, it's really easy to do. That categorization gets done in settings. And once you go through to settings, you'll then want to go through to the account configuration button here and go through and give your different types of accounts categories. That'll make sure this report comes alive for you, and it'll give you the best set of data. Now, if you're an accounting firm that has a standardized chart of accounts, then that's fantastic, because you get another level of efficiency here. You can do it once for a client and then copy it from another one of your farms. So when you do that, we'll then pull through that same setting, the different categories, payment period, and whether it's hidden or detailed on the budget. But we can pull through that account configuration from another one of your farms, again, so that when you do look at that benchmark, you're comparing apples to apples, and you're actually looking at what's under that category and what accounts that you commonly use under that category versus the rest of your clients. So that kind of summarizes the running of the report and the creation of the benchmark. Just to quickly summarize what we did, we were at your my.figure.com. We went through to the benchmarking tab that's available if you're an admin to your organization, and we looked at some of the farms that one of our training partners has. We then created a new benchmark, and we went through the process of finding the farms we want to have in there, choosing the details and the type of report that we want this to be. Now, this means that, of course, if you want to change that report for a different year, you can go back to your general setup and then change the year that it's running for, and that'll use that financial year set of data. We went through, we looked at some of the benchmark scores, which is Figured's little tool for highlighting the data that's available within those Figured files and within those Xero files in order to make sure that you do have the best data for a benchmark. We looked at how the different metrics that you choose are available here, and you can enable or disable certain ones, which maybe might not be so relevant to your organization. Then we looked at the data, and we looked at how easy it is to run a benchmark just by clicking rerun, and then immediately how that takes the sample across all of your different clients, then produces a really easy way to update against the metric and see which farms have outlier sets of data. And then we made sure that your farms were enabled with benchmarking, because like I mentioned, they won't have it automatically. So going to your organization, then through to your farms and enabling your benchmarking for the farm. Then we went through to their farm, we went to the reports under benchmarks, and then we ran the benchmark against one of the pools. We saw that it took a minute or two to run, and that's okay, because then once you've done that, you can then view that report and then see, and then from here, print that out just by using share report and export to PDF. From here, I think it'd be amazing if you then took that and you then printed that out and used that in your next client meeting, or you emailed it out with a quick little end of year summary for your clients. This is free to use up until the beginning of February. So I really recommend jump in, start making some pools, take a look at the data you've got now. If you've been keeping everything up to date, that's amazing, because that means you've got everything ready for you straight away. Then go in, start running some of these reports for your clients and see the kind of conversations that are coming as a result of this. We're really excited to be bringing this to the market. We know this is one of the really unique things about Figured, is that there is this really easy way to input data collaboratively, and now there's another unique way to use that data and to share it across the rest of your firm. Now, just to wrap this up, I do have a few different practical notes when you're doing your benchmarks and creating them. One of them is to write detailed descriptions for your benchmarks. So I talked about that a little bit earlier. When you're making a benchmark, be as detailed as you can in the description for that. Think about what type of data, where are the farmers, what type of farms are being included, because that'll make it a lot easier when you're looking at it after the fact to see which benchmark pool makes the most sense to compare your clients to. The second one is that all of your actual data is coming from Xero. So it's really important to make sure that all your bank rec is set and up to date. Now, a neat little tip we came across was to take your Xero HQ and create a group for your benchmarking clients. With that group, you can then periodically go through, and you'll have a nice big list of them, and go through and go to their Xero files and make sure that they are up to date. Once they are up to date, and of course they'll sync through to Figures, so then we are up to date as well. That means that when you run those benchmarking pools, you'll be running the latest set of data, and it's the most accurate set of data. We're really closing that feedback loop there, and by putting them into their own special group here, it's an easy way to identify which ones are the most important if you've got quite a few clients in your Xero HQ. And the last one that I've got here is that I recommend, and you don't necessarily have to do this, but I recommend running your benchmark monthly. So you're always comparing it to the latest set of data. There is a minimum of 20 farms for a pool. So not just 20 farms for your firm, 20 farms for the pool itself, to make sure there's enough data to generate statistical significance with the reports. You can do it with less, but we can't guarantee the quality of them. That's why that golden number is 20 farms. We really recommend it if you can do that. Use it with the minimum 20, but of course more is better. So if you have more farms that are available to you, fantastic. Chuck them all into there and you'll be able to get some really great averages at the end of the day. Now that wraps up our webinar today on benchmarking in Figured. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for listening through and watching me as I went through creating one of our benchmark pools. I'd be really keen for you now to jump off, go and create a pool maybe for your firm just to see what it's like and see what kind of unique reports you can generate right off the bat. This takes us to the end of the webinar too, so if you have any questions, please feel free to fire them through either using the Zoom chat or using the Q&A within Zoom. I'll be available for the next 10 minutes or so we can work through some examples together, or if you have questions on other parts of the product, we can go through that as well. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day, have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and we look forward to seeing you in a webinar next year in 2019.